Good morning to everybody in North America, and afternoon to those of you in Europe. I know that several of my ex-colleagues and network from Africa are tuning in as well in the Middle East. So it's a good afternoon to all of you, and Happy New Year to everybody. It's great to kick off the new year with a very special program that I have today, and I'll introduce my guest in just a short moment. But if you ever find yourself in the situation where stress is consuming yourself and impacting your confidence, or if you've ever heard a lot about empathetic leadership, what is it? What does it mean? Do I have it? Am I born with it? Can I develop it? We're going to talk about a lot of these things on this program, so you're in the right place. Stay tuned, and I thank you for taking the time to tune in. Please do tee up any questions, comments. Let me know where you're coming from, and if you're watching this on replay, I know that most of you will wind up seeing this on replay. Please do feel free to continue to tee up questions, even though it's not live, and my special guest and I will certainly get back to you with responses promptly on that as well. So my special guest today is Amy McCae. Amy, Happy New Year. Welcome to the program.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me, Brett. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great. And just for the audience, Amy is a workplace wellness coach, and she's a transformational speaker. She's a trainer as well. She helps industry leaders reduce stress and overwhelming situations. She is an expert at helping people remain calm under adversity. She is incredibly resilient. We're going to talk about that. I wrote a bit about that yesterday on my feed, and one of the things that attracted me to Amy when we met about a year ago was how resilient she has been amidst adversity. And for those of you that know me, know that I've guided large teams through significant economic crises in different parts of the world. And when adversity hits, very few people tend to stay the course and perform. But when the sun is shining and things are, going great out there, everybody tends to do well. But as we know, life doesn't always work that way. The sun's not out every day, and that type of thing. So we're going to hopefully tool you up, those of you that are tuning in. And please, again, engage with us if you'd like to, or just sit back and enjoy it, and get out a pen and paper, because that rainy day will come if the sun is shining, and that's just the way that life is. And it might impact you personally, it might impact you professionally, it might impact a family member, but that adversity will come. And so if you're better equipped to embrace it and deal with it, you can perform well, or you can be resilient in your personal life. And we're going to talk about some tools today, because Amy's an expert on that as well. And we'll talk a bit about how she wound up doing what she's doing. But she went through, as I wrote yesterday, significant health crisis for roughly 10 years, and there was something that happened on one day, and that was really the trigger for her. So we're going to really talk about that, because I know I've had moments like that in my life as well, where that day or that moment just was a turning point or a pivot point, and I think we all have that as well. But that helped Amy really develop a passion for helping other people. So I'll let her talk about that. She's got 17 certifications related to mind and body wellness, and she helps people build self-awareness, holistic health, and empathetic leadership. So there's a lot to unpack there as well. And Amy, before we kind of get into the conversation, if there's anything that I left out about your background, your experience, your certifications, feel free to fill it in right now.
No, you did a good job. Thank you.
There was a lot there.
There's a lot there. To me, they all go
yeah.
together, but I don't think everybody feels that way or understands it that way. In my mind, it all goes together. But yes, I can see where it
well,
doesn't.
that's life, right?
Yeah.
The oftentimes people, and I guess we'll talk a little bit about this, but oftentimes people think, I mean, today you hear people talk a lot about, okay, mental health is important, and it is, but does that mean that physical health isn't important, or vice versa, right?
Right. Or the one doesn't impact the other.
Right. We're one person. So,
right.
so the holistic view is that way. Can you tell us a little bit what you're comfortable discussing about the day that it all changed for you? I know that you and I spoke previously about that you were dealing for roughly a decade with a chronic illness, and you went through something like 9 specialist
9 urologists.
doctors,
Yeah.
9 urologists over a
Urologists
decade.
alone.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about, not necessarily the specifics of that, but tell us a bit about, with that as a background, how everything changed for you one day.
So just as a background, I actually had a fascination with medicine and healing. My plan was to be a doctor. I spent my entire life wanting to be a doctor. And then when my mom died when I was 20, I lost pretty much all interest in that. And then oddly enough, ironically, I spent my 20s chronically sick, and I did have 9 urologists. I went to the bathroom 30 to 40 times a day. And then that day, the day was I had she'll be 20 in a couple of weeks, she was a newborn baby. And I had a day where I was in so much pain and so sick that I couldn't take care of her, that I really did literally crawl to the phone and had to ask for help. So I just said,
wow.
Screw this. I'm not going to do it anymore. So I did go looking for healing in different places, and I found it through fitness, nutrition, and meditation. Those were things that totally changed my life. So I thought, I'm spending all this time living this lifestyle and researching this. Why don't I get more educated and get certifications on it and start sharing it with other people? So it re-inspired my passion for healing and wellness and helping people. So from that day forward, like that was, 19 years ago or whatever. And since then, I get a new certification basically every year. I get coaching every year, and I use it.
Wow. Yeah, that's fantastic. So a lot of people have those, I don't know if we call them a moment, or, just that time that things happen and everything that way. And I mean, that experience must have, I'm sure you're reminded of that every day, and grateful for how you responded to it.
Yeah. I don't think I think much about it anymore, but I was thinking about, like, when you're talking about, I think of more, newer scenarios than that one. And I was thinking about this morning, and I was doing some research on, like, what was it like? And it was motivation. And then, like, we talk about dopamine and it being this reward, but I've learned that dopamine actually is kind of what inspires motivation. So I believe what occurred then was I was so motivated to do something different. There's that rush, I have to do something different, that's what happened, is that motivation. We talk about resilience. It's a lot of times about internal resources. Well, I didn't have that many. I was in my 20s, and I wasn't as bright as I was. I'm a lot brighter and have a lot more wisdom at my age now. Right. So I'm like, what internal resources did I have? I had motivation to change, a drive to change.
Right. Do you think people are born resilient?
No.
Okay.
I don't.
I would share your view, actually. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't, because it seems like it's those difficult times that build it, or they build it and are seeking for how to be resilient, because something tragic happens, something traumatic happens, and we seek out a way to resolve it. I personally don't know anyone that said, well, I'm just resilient because life has been easy. I don't personally know anyone. I can't say for sure that that's the whole world and every person here is that way. But from my experience, I don't personally know anyone. They built that resilience based off experiences, and a lot of experiences.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that, based on my inexperience as I went through my own life, and went through the immaturity stage, and after becoming an adult, and doing the things, and the first and last time I ever quit or gave up. I learned last week not to use the word quit. I gave up. Gave up something was going to university and dropping out after 10 days because I basically, in hindsight, was a baby. But I blamed everybody else other than myself for that. And once I, kind of grew up and understood that perspective, and that experience alone fueled me for the next 40 plus years of my life up through today because of what I learned that way. So I agree with you that I think it's something that we pick it up, and the learning is never officially over with, and that type of thing. And so hopefully we can teach others and save them. That's why I do what I do. Hopefully we can save people years with something by telling our story, so that they can, shortcut's not the right word, but kind of
a little bit of ease and grace, maybe.
Yeah, help them up the learning curve, right? That's probably the right way to put it. So
yeah, definitely.
I think that's great. Let's talk a little bit about stress. Okay. Stress is something, as we all know, we all are faced with it. It's the type of thing that can either consume us, destroy us, cause significant health issues, significant physical health issues, mental issues, all sorts of problems. But stress, if you look at what is stress, it actually usually involves something that we care about, right? Something that we care about. Otherwise, we wouldn't experience.
Wouldn't be stressed about it, right? We wouldn't.
Yeah. What's your view on stress in general, and are there any positive aspects to that? And then we'll talk a little bit about how to manage it, because I know you help people manage stress, Amy. Yeah.
So sure, there's good stress, even like physical strength. Like think about lifting weights. That's a good example of you're putting stress on the bone. So that's a physical example. But there are good stresses. Stress allows you to see that you need to make a change. So it's not all bad. What going on in the body physiologically is that your amygdala is activated. That's a reptilian part of your brain. So that's that fight, flight, or freeze response, which again can be good. It's when it's obviously everyone knows when it's in overdrive for so long, that's a problem. And your sympathetic nervous system is in overdrive, that it causes a lot of it wreaks havoc on your body and your mental state, because obviously your brain is activated in the part, and you don't want to be using that part of your brain to make decisions. You want to use the executive function parts of your brain. So,
gotcha. Yeah, and then when we experience stress, so what's your advice to somebody on the approach or things that they should think about? Let's say that they're stressed right now. And what is your approach with people that you work with, kind of a first step and a second step to kind of understand how to better manage stress?
That's a very good question. So first of all, I'm a huge proponent of self-awareness. So obviously, like usually what I want to understand about someone is their core values, because then I understand what motivates them and what drives them, and where that stress could be coming. And then another aspect of self-awareness is knowing what is their thinking, like what are those, in coaching we call it monkey mind, all that crap that we tell ourselves. What are their emotional processes, and then what drives their behavior. So when we understand those things, then it usually reduces the stress, just having an understanding of those things, because you can again begin to kind of laugh at yourself over the thoughts you have. You ask yourself, is it true? You realize that you're having this thought. The big thing is being able to practice the pause and have enough awareness, right? Have awareness that you're having this thought, have awareness that you have this emotion, have awareness that this behavior is a problem. Because when you have awareness, then you have this ability to make a conscious choice and change it. Then you don't have the stress, because you feel more in control of your life, or you realize what you don't have control over, and then you can kind of let it go. So that's where that power comes from. And there are tools too.
Yeah, stress can be, what you're saying is, so stress can be useful to a person.
Absolutely,
because they understand it.
If they understand it, instead of anytime we judge something or resist something, I always say what you resist persists. Anytime you judge something, it's going to wreak havoc on everything in your body too, and your mind. So if you can, again, step back, evaluate it, and then make a decision. It's a lot easier. That makes sense.
Do you think, based on your interaction with lots of people over the course of your life, that this aspect of stress is well understood or not?
No.
Yeah, neither do I.
When people are stuck, when your amygdala is activated, I talk about this all the time. I share it on almost every podcast. I share it on LinkedIn. I share it everywhere. When your amygdala is activated, you cannot make a conscious choice because you're using that part of your brain, this part that is emotionally reactive. It's emotionally charged. So you have to deactivate it. You have to find ways to, and affect labeling is what it's called in psychology. We call it mindful emotions and mindfulness, but it's naming what you're feeling begins to deactivate that and allow you access to the prefrontal cortex, which is all executive thinking. So if you want to make those intuitive, creative, visionary like decisions, they can't be emotionally charged, which are coming from the amygdala. So you have to use those practices that soothe that part and allow you access to it. Because it is hard. I've been in a stressful situation where I bet I could say to everybody, have you ever sent a text that you regretted? I don't know anyone who hasn't, but that was an emotionally charged decision. And that wasn't a conscious decision on what you really wanted. That was, I'm stressed, right? I'm anxious. I'm upset. I'm whatever. I'm in some very frightening type emotion.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's so important. I appreciate you talking about it in this context, because I think to summarize this point before we move on, is that the fact is that for those of you out there that are stressed, I'll just say it directly, you can do something about that, and there is help available out there. And I think Amy has just spoken for a few minutes about the perspective that you can have on stress, and by understanding this perspective, you can then better manage it, and it does not need to be destructive and negatively impact your physical and or mental health as well. So do something, learn more about it, and maybe attempt to do some of these things. I have a view that whenever I'm fearful of something, by the way, it took me many, many years to practice the concept that I'm going to talk about. Whenever I'm fearful of something, what I learned through experience is that the downside is never as severe as what my mind was telling me that it could be. So once I learned that, like a little boy, when my mom used to take me swimming, I dipped my little toe in the water and said, it's too cold to jump in. And she said, just get in the water. And so sometimes it's better to just dive in. So fear, to me, what I learned, the net takeaway is that fear is fuel for just moving forward. And that's how I view fear. I don't make stupid decisions, hopefully, and I undertake due diligence and know kind of what I'm getting into. But for the most part, whenever I have that fear feeling, just jump in. And that has served me well as well. So I think what you spoke about with stress, these are tactics that hopefully you, the viewers, can take these and just dive in, continue to move forward as well. Amy, just a sec, I want to acknowledge a few people that are coming in. The LinkedIn comments are kind of coming in slow today, so if I don't mention it, it's not myself. I'm showing 4 people here right now, but I'm also showing that between YouTube and LinkedIn, we've got 35 people tuning in right now. So we have Denise from Houston. Denise, thank you. I know you said you'd be here. Thank you very much for tuning in. We have Ferlin Quang. It is midnight in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, my favorite part of the world, Asia Pacific, where I spent a big part of my career. We have Cynthia from Dubai here. I've lived in Dubai. I love the UAE. Cynthia, thank you for taking time out of your Friday evening and we have Fred Diamond, who's also here as well. And Fred has said, what you resist persists. And I think that he's agreeing with your perspective on that. And Cynthia's talking about that you explain the power of the pause so well, Amy. And Ferlin says awareness is important. And yeah, I think that kind of summarizes that as well. And fearfulness just jump in. Kara White has joined the conversation. So we'll get back to the conversation, but yeah, please tee up your comments and continue, and I'll come back to them in just a short while as well. Amy, let's move on to something that you're that I know you know a lot about, you're passionate about, and that's emotional intelligence. And you did a post earlier this week that, there's a lot of posts that people see and they hit people in different ways, but something buried in your post really struck a chord with me. And the topic was about emotional intelligence. And what I was fascinated by, and I'd like to ask you about this and ask you to elaborate on it, because I think the viewers will want to hear about it, is that the way that the brain operates. I think you said something like that the cause of the problem, you can't solve a problem in the same part of the brain that caused the problem. Do I have that right?
Close. You can't solve problems from
why
the
don't
same
you
level of thinking.
why don't you let's have the expert take it over here. If you could talk a bit about that would be great.
Sure. My post was, well, partially regarding empathy, which is one domain of emotional intelligence. It's just one domain of emotional intelligence. And I shared that I had this experience at 33 where I was suddenly aware of my neighbor who was acting like she was being nice to me, suddenly aware of her thoughts and her feelings. And again, I didn't know this could happen, and it kind of freaked me out. I thought I really needed to commit myself, but at any rate, I kind of did a bunch of research and realized that it's just neuroscience, and there's some books on it and some things, but I realized that we could all use our minds differently. And my point in that post was that we need empathetic leadership, but we also need visionary leaders, because we're dealing with problems we didn't have before. How many of us have lived through a pandemic? So if we think that we're going to solve them through the same level of thinking, I'm not so sure that that's it. So I think Einstein's, or somebody said it first. That's not my quote, but it is something along those lines about if we're going to solve problems, we have to do it from a different level of mind than what created them.
Yeah, I think thank you for getting that right, and I think that's important again, because if we can understand that, it causes us. Maybe that's another example of what you talk about with the power of the pause, right? If you can kind of pause and gain the perspective that you just mentioned that way, it might help our ability to solve problems.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have to pause. You can't make a conscious choice from an emotional reactive state. You have to pause. And I'll give you two examples of mindfulness, like in some of the practices I use in action. So Wednesday morning, I woke up not feeling well. And I always suggest to people to don't check your phone first thing in the morning. Again, this is a dopamine thing and setting the stage for your day. So don't check your phone. So I thought, boy, I knew how I wanted to set the tone for my day. And I thought, you know what, I don't feel well. How am I going to set the tone? So I just sat and paid attention to my breath for a while. The other night, mentally, I was in this less than ideal place. So I had a colleague say, hey, I created a post that everybody's like doing this, sending love and healing to each other. So I sat there and did this, maybe at ease, maybe at peace, this loving kindness type meditation. And again, did it fix my problem? No, but it fixed how I was feeling in that moment. So that's a way to be emotionally intelligent and to use a different type of thinking and kind of like, did it solve everything? No, but it helped where I was at in that moment and allowed me to get clear, to not be in that. I could have very easily woke up and been mad about how my day was going to go and been cranky about it. Could have very easily stuck in my mental drama, know? But I was like, oh, this is an opportunity. Hey, I'm going to do something different I'm going to choose something different instead of sitting in my crap. That's emotional intelligence. I feel this way. I have the power to sit in it or have the power to do something about it.
Right. The pandemic, I know you and I spoke, it's probably a year ago. This just popped into my mind here about the impact that the pandemic had on children, right? And all of this as well. And how important is empathetic leadership in the pandemic era economy?
Well, I think we were lacking it and it was needed. It just brought, the pandemic brought to light everything we were already messing up. It just made it full blown obvious that we had a lot of problems. So I can tell you that everybody wants to be heard, seen, validated, and empathy allows you to do that. So employers, business owners are going to have to learn the skill and practice it. And I actually hear from middle management all the time that it's the CEOs that are lacking the empathy. So that might be true in some cases. So empathy is really just understanding, again, it's one domain like self-awareness of emotional intelligence. It's understanding what someone else is feeling. So there's cognitive, which is knowing, and there's experiential, which is feeling. And again, this is pretty cool because again, this is your mind and your body, right? People aren't thinking cognitive's your mind. These are connected. And this is how we understand people. So an example would be putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Another example would be actually feeling what somebody's feeling. Those are two most common talked about types.
Yeah, I'd like to talk or have you talk more about that in just a second. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. But Amy, it sounds so simple. You and I are sitting here talking about it, but yet, and the data supports the fact. And I think Fred Diamond did a separate post before we went live today, talking about in the current economy, there's more job losses out there. And that type of thing. And, he's right. You can see the economic data was released early this morning. So it seems so easy when we're talking about it, but why in the world do you think that based on the data that the empathetic leadership is just not there at scale, at least in the United States?
Oh, I could hypothesize a lot of things. I feel like we have a culture that has bought into the idea that more is better, that busy is better. We're not practicing the pause. Everyone's about productivity. They think emotional intelligence is some soft skill. It's not, it's a human skill. I think we have missed that. So if we could, and I don't know, I'm out here preaching this all the time. Getting people to listen is another story. And I do get people to listen, but then getting people to actually do it. I have clients that they pay me money and they still don't do it. That's still, it's a practice. Like it's a continually coming back to, we resist it. Emotional empathy and emotional intelligence are hard things. It's a new thing. It's a new skill. New stuff is hard. We resist change, right? And it's hard because it's uncomfortable. We feel our pain then. We're forced to deal with the reality, what's going on, instead of just skimming the surface and getting the job done. People avoid that in our culture specifically.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that my own perspective in that I think underpinning all of this in the corporate world is the 1970s institutionalized profits at any cost. Profits before people, shareholder first. That became, a big thing. That became
mainstream.
It became mainstream, and it still is today, right?
Yes.
In 2020,
and that generation in general, like it's very, very hard to reach that generation, and they're kind of retiring. But it's very difficult they resist change more so than any generation I've ever seen. So we're kind of preaching to the choir there. So maybe it's reaching. The younger generation seem to be more receptive to the idea and maybe just more naturally attuned or willing to at least consider it.
I think you're right. I think between what you touched on and this point, I think that's kind of somewhere. It's a pretty good job at identifying the root of the issue. For those of you watching this, you're not going to be able to at scale change the profits before people type of culture. That's not something you can do. You can change it in what you do though, and you can put people before profits, and that's going to require some sacrifice of figuring out how do you deliver for the owners of your company, for your bosses. If you have bosses out there and you're an individual contributor, how do you deliver while changing how you deliver and that type of thing? And that's really where the value of what Amy is talking about today can be applied in a business sense to help you advance your career. Because I will tell you, because the majority don't do what we're talking about, the few that do it are rewarded heavily by the marketplace. Okay. That's why I focus on elite performance, meaning, or another definition, the first decile, the top 10%, the creme de la creme from a performance perspective. Okay. It's less crowded airspace. So it's kind of like flying into the Omaha, Nebraska airport compared to Chicago O'Hare. I'd much rather fly into Omaha than that hornet's nest of O'Hare, okay? Because the chances of delays, the chances of an accident are so much greater when you have crowded space. And your ability to earn more income is restricted in the airspace above O'Hare compared to a smaller market like Omaha, Nebraska. So think about how can you not just avoid Chicago O'Hare, but maybe you should take a long haul flight to Dubai, okay, where Cynthia is, because what happens is that you can give up some short-term satisfaction of being there and play the long game, meaning put people first by practicing empathetic leadership, by practicing the pause, as Amy mentioned, and putting stress into the proper perspective. These kind of things are going to take time and investment, and they're going to be uncomfortable to do. But what I'm trying to say, to sum up, is that because so few people do it, for those of you watching, you master this, you will be rewarded much more heavily by the marketplace because it's less crowded and you're developing a premium skill. Anything to add, Amy?
I think that there will be businesses that are going to go out if they don't, or out of business if they don't embrace it. Like there just isn't, we don't have a choice. They don't have quiet quitting, and we had the great resignation and whatever going on. If you don't embrace the ideas of human skills, of understanding our common humanity and what drives people, they're not going to overdo themselves anymore for you to give them cracker crumbs,
I think you're right, and it's already happening in some respects, right? And if you look at the resiliency throughout the pandemic, not to get too much off topic because I want to move on to something else, but you look at the resiliency of tech firms, Zoom, Amazon, Walmart, digital, Starbucks, digital, the digital aspect of those companies, that Apple, way ahead of the curve, right? They're now starting to, peel back and feel some of the pains here. And I would argue that they rode the wave that was very pandemic friendly, right? Everybody needed to upgrade.
Everybody had to be online.
They had to be online. So I need a new computer. I need a new iPad. And by the way, Amazon, wow, they can deliver to my door. I don't need to put on a mask and go out, all of these things. Walmart up their game. And instead of just Walmart's digital offering in the United States is amazing. And they now compete head on with Amazon. But look at Amazon's market cap. Look at Apple. Apple dipped below 2 trillion the other day. Look at Tesla. Look at all of these companies that flourished during the pandemic. Now they're softening. It makes one wonder if empathetic leadership is missing from those organizations despite their resiliency in the pandemic. Maybe it was all driven by consumer demand and less about leadership. Time will tell, and I'm not an expert on this, but I have a feeling that we're kind of hitting the nail on the head. And you look at, I was in your part of the country until recently, and I remember going on runs in the afternoon, and I would see national food chains saying drive-through open at 7 p.m. and things like this, which means that fast food restaurants were missing lunches because they couldn't find employees. So can you imagine operating or owning a franchise of a fast food restaurant? You can't serve lunch. How sustainable is that going to be? And sure enough, these places several months later, they start to shut down. So I think you're spot on about this as well. I want to go back over to the live LinkedIn. We've got a lot of activity over here. Amy, you're a popular guest here to kick off the year. You certainly are. It's the work you do. Cynthia's made a comment. When we conquer the things that scare us, we realize there was not much to fear as well. We talked about that. I think you're right, Cynthia. Jane Lehman is joining. Jane, thank you for joining. Jane is actually responsible for Amy, you and I connecting, I think, as you know. So that's great. And we have Earl Allen on here as well. And Earl, thank you for joining. The power of the pause can protect us from negative consequences. You definitely got it as well. Cynthia's got more comments here. People can kind of read through those. Fred, thanks for all of your participation even before the live stream, and people need to subscribe to your podcast. It's exceptional. Fred's saying this content is so important that elite performers are always looking for ways to take their careers to the next level, and these approaches are critical to that happening. That's right, because what happens is, today's a sunny day where I'm at, but yesterday was, we had flooding rains yesterday. So you never know. You plan an outdoor activity and you have flooding rains and 60-mile-an-hour gusts of wind. It might ruin the physical activity outdoors that you're planning to do. So elite performers are prepared for that, and they have an alternative, so they continue to carry forward as well. You look at the professional football player, and we have a big international audience, but you might have heard about the near tragic incident that happened on American football on Monday night, where a player was injured and had some form of cardiac arrest. Not going to get into the details. Fortunately, he's recovering, and hopefully he will. But you look at those situations, and it puts resiliency, and the fact that I'm sure that because professional athletes, this person as well, was in such exceptional condition, physical condition, it probably is increasing his chances of continuing to live. And so these things are all very important. So Fred, that's a great point. And Jane mentions that in urgent situations, it's critical to find a solution as quickly as possible. You're right. Agility is important. And then get to work right away on it. Sometimes we lose perspective when we try to figure out who is at fault, or why did something happen before we take the problem. And I could talk forever about this, Jane. Maybe I need to have you on the program, because this is the adversity quotient, AQ, which we're not going to get into on this program, but I talk about that a lot. And playing the blame game or the victim game does not get anybody anywhere in life, other than if you're a politician or somebody that's attempting to monetize the suffering of somebody else. It just doesn't solve anything and doesn't help other people. If you're a servant leader, you're not a victim type of mindset. So I completely agree with you, Jane, on that. You obviously hit a nerve with me on that one, and I'm completely with you as well. Cynthia is agreeing with Jane, and Jane Lehman's a super connector. Yes, Cynthia, she is. Amy, let's get back to our conversation here. In the lead up to this discussion, I spoke a bit about reading other people, reading the room, and this came from a discussion you and I had earlier in the week about how you can help, some methods that you help people with the ability to read a room. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because that's something that's really important, and any leader that builds the capability to read a room is going to elevate their leadership to the next level. Could you talk a bit about that?
Absolutely. I think
Mm.
that that's a really important topic. So emotional intelligence is basically understanding, recognizing, understanding your own emotions, as well as recognizing, understanding someone else's. So when you walk
Mm.
into a room, that's what's happening. When you walk into a room, what you're feeling is the energy of other people's emotions now, or knowing. So that is kind of like empathy, right? It's a
Hmm.
sensitivity. Empathy is this knowing or feeling other people's emotions. So the sensitivity to energy is the same thing. All you're doing is um, knowing what you're feeling and knowing what the room is feeling or what those people are feeling.
Hmm.
I do this by knowing myself and my feelings. I do it by ensuring that I feel separate. Like I sense, these are again mindfulness based stuff. I sense my hands and feet. I sense my breath, um, those sorts of things to feel like disconnected and be like solid. So that allows me to not get mixed up into what other people are feeling and sensing. So then I'm aware. Everyone's walked, technically, this isn't some woo woo skill. Everyone's walked into a store and said, or a meeting and went, oh, what is this? This feels icky to me, right? That's happened to everybody. I don't know anyone that can say that. Or gotten an email. Here's an example is one time I had a phone, voicemail. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm mad about that. I didn't reply. And then I went and listened to it later. Oh, that's not at all what they said. So it's very important to know your feelings
Mm.
in order to read that room. Very, very important because you're going to read it wrong. You're going to misinterpret it if you have a bunch of crap going on. Like that day when I listened to that voicemail, that was my crap. Wasn't that. So
It
being
wasn't
able
the
to
other
read,
person, right?
no, it was me. So being able to read a room starts with you being emotionally intelligent. I mean, absolutely.
Hmm.
There's some things that they teach when you become a mindfulness teacher on how to hold space in a room, and those are things that are really important. Is to be able to hold space in a room, because if you can't hold space, how can you read the room?
What
You
does that, could you talk a little bit more about what that means, holding space in the room?
Well, being fully present, not looking at your phone, not thinking about something else, not thinking, oh, my jeans are too tight, does my butt look big? All these,
Mm-hmm.
am I prepared enough? I'm worried about, feeling anxious about, maybe it's anxious about the presentation, maybe it's I had a fight with my spouse, or whatever it is. It's being fully present, being there, and knowing what your skill set is that you bring to the table. What do you bring to the room? Um, some people are very good with their
Right.
tone of voice. Some people are very good at their authenticity. Some people are really good at telling stories. It's knowing that. You have to have a high
Mm-hmm.
level of self-awareness and being able to stay grounded. I do specific rituals and stuff, like different practices before and during, in order to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's difficult though, isn't it? Let's say that somebody has something going
Especially if you're
on.
mad.
Yeah, you're mad. Something in your
Yeah.
personal life, right, is
Yeah.
going on, and you're in this environment, in the room. I mean, to block that out requires more than just a discipline, right?
Yeah, I think this again comes from having some internal resources that you've already built, right? You have the skill set. I teach these mindfulness based practices and things regarding self awareness. Those are my internal resources, and I use them then. Sometimes it
Right.
might be as simple as I have to go write a bunch of stuff sometimes, and literally with a pen, not type it, whatever's bothering me, and be like, okay, I'm going to deal with you later, and then go do it.
Right. So get
But I
out
can't just do it in
the,
my head. I have to put it on paper and fold it up and like,
yeah,
okay, I'll come back to
exactly.
you.
There's a
And it,
tip for everybody, right?
or put it in a
So the
box,
next,
a mental
yeah.
box. I put it in when you don't have a pen and paper and someone just ticked you off and you have to go speak or do something. I'm like, okay, get out the mental box, put it over there, let my mind know, the monkey mind, that's whatever. Okay, I'm going to put it over there and I'll come back to you, because your thoughts and emotions want to be validated as much as any other person, and they won't, like, what you resist persists. So you have to acknowledge them, and then they're not so persistent. So that's what I do in those situations is, but again, that comes with being aware. I'm aware that I'm having that thought. I'm not letting that anger or whatever. Sometimes somebody says something that hurts my feelings, and again, I'm internalizing something that might not be what they mean. Better to put it aside,
Mm.
put it in the box, come back to it.
Yeah, put it in that box. You deal with it later. Sometimes it's okay to just let that telephone ring, right?
Yes.
Don't
Don't answer.
just you don't have to drop everything and be distracted by that or that text coming through. Just kind of put it
Let
in
it
the
go.
box. I love that
Put it in the
idea.
box. Put it in the
Yeah,
box. Put it on the paper or put
absolutely.
it in the box.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Self-awareness. What are some things that people can do that you maybe you haven't talked about that you help your clients with on how can they build more self-awareness around some of these points?
So my specific go-tos are, first of all, core values. Always do
Mm,
core values first.
mm.
And it's amazing to me how many people in a leadership position don't know what their top 5 core values are. These are what's driving your behavior. How do you not know that? But they have, or they won't know their emotional processes. So in mindfulness, we teach like these practices that help you to rewire your brain. Like it's paying attention to your breathing, it's tuning into your body, it's naming what you're feeling, it's offering yourself compassion, it's having the ability to
Mm.
cultivate curiosity about your experience instead of judgment. It's journaling, it's gratitude. I teach all of these things, and we ask a lot of questions. And then I help people understand what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and what they need to do about it.
Right.
Largely based off their core values, and then whatever it is that the stories they tell themselves, which are always, I have lots of intriguing thoughts that go in my head. And we make friends with them, like invite them in for tea. That's what we say. Invite it in for tea. Instead of resisting it, invite it in for tea. Why do I have this thought? And it doesn't have to be, sometimes it's, I need to just acknowledge I have this thought and let it go. And it's that simple. It doesn't have to be this huge, long, work on this for months sort of thing.
Mm. I think you're right. I think just to comment on core values are not something that should just be in the HR manual when you sign up and join a company that you're supposed to read as part of your orientation. What Amy's talking about here are your core values, right? And by the way, searching for a job, okay, is a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. So that means that if there's a mismatch in your core values with the core values of the company that you're joining, not by what's in their book, by what they do, what you see from their customers, what you see from their employees. This is all part, I encourage people to do a lot of due diligence on your employer, because it is a two-way street. And, you can fire your boss if you're not happy with your situation. It's not just that you can be fired by the boss. So I think a lot of this, what I'm hoping for those of you watching this is that you're going to take away some things that by the power of the pause, to just step back, look at the overall perspective, whether that's the room that you want to read the room, whether it's making sure that your emotions are put away in a box and you deal with them later, but not right now. I just saw a comment in here. Jane, I think, mentioned the fact that people often make assumptions too early. Don't assume, because you don't really know what people are going through. So all of these tactics, that's the power of the pause, and to find a way to kind of keep yourself in check, especially if you're a leader, okay, responsible for the flourishing of the village. These things are incredibly important. And again, you master these things that Amy's talking about, you will perform in the elite category, and you will command a premium for not just higher compensation, but better jobs, better cultures, better ownership, everything. When I say the marketplace rewards, it's not just monetarily, challenges your ability to for personal growth. So these things can be applied, and they can be applied immediately, but can be a little bit uncomfortable to do, as Amy said earlier, because it's outside of your zone and it takes some work. But if you put in the work with the right attitude, then you can perform at this level. Anything to add, Amy, on top of that?
I want to add the psychological safety piece, just because this is such a hot topic that I think it's important to realize that you will have to have emotional intelligence to address this. It doesn't make any sense to think that you're not going to have to understand people's thinking and feeling and address psychological safety, because you don't You can't, it's impossible. So if we're going to establish trust, which is what
Right.
employees need, you have to have psychological safety. If you want to have psychological safety, you have to have emotional intelligence. There's not any way around that.
Yeah. And, it's a shame that we have to talk about this, frankly, but we do. And so for those of you that might, or maybe somebody that is been psychologically unsafe, okay, and there's the statistics support the fact that this is a huge issue. Okay, so it's not just, oh, it doesn't apply to me, and it applies to everybody. And being psychologically safe means that it really involves how others feel. Okay, do they feel that they're being included? Do they feel that they're part of a team? Do they feel that their opinion is important? Do they feel good, or do they not feel good? And this is again at the root of a lot of problems that people are encountering now. So, Amy, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it is important. And empathetic leadership, you'd better have it. Just like you better have, it's just as important as having a high adversity quotient. You're not going to be able to deal with that thunderstorm and continue to progress without that adversity quotient. You're not going to be able to operate a business sustainably without empathetic leadership. There's just no doubts. And that trust is everything in relationships. In all relationships, whether it's business or personal, right? You've got to have it. And so being empathetic to that is incredibly important. And knowing, importantly, if you're in a leadership position, it becomes even more important than if you're an individual contributor, because you're dealing with, you're not personally delivering the work. You're in charge of the ecosystem of the people that are delivering the work. So you'd better get your arms around the empathetic leadership, especially if you want to engage the younger generations, which frankly is the future workforce, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a lot to unpack there, my friend. So without a doubt here, let's just, as we start to wrap up here, talk to me a little bit about mindfulness, meditation, and I'm just, as an amateur at a lot of this stuff myself, I'll just speak for myself. I run across a lot of people that think they know a lot about this. I admit that I don't, to be perfectly frank. I'm just being honest, putting it out there. I'm not an expert in it. I moderately understand it. But most people I talk to, the response is, yeah, I get it. And I ask them a couple of questions. Well, how do you deal with the fact that, this is what I go through, Amy, is that, well, I don't think it's perfect. It's not the right music, or I just don't feel relaxed enough. Do I need to sit up straight? Do I need to lay down on a couch? What if I fall asleep? And, and then I find that people can't answer these questions to help me get over the hump here. Give us your perspective on how can somebody get started with meditation, mindfulness, and these types of things. What is the best? Because there's 1,000 apps out there that you can download for your phone, and YouTube videos free for people looking to save money. You can download spa music. But what is the best approach for people to use in this crowded airspace?
So there's a lot of different things. There's a whole bunch there that you said. So let's start with, first of all, an app is not the same. It will guide you to relax. So I will not discount the benefit of apps, but an app will have a very difficult time actually teaching you the nature of mind, which is actually what meditation does. But it will help you relax. So I definitely don't discount them. And there are some that are really, really good out there. So when we talk about, let me tell you a story. My first meditation class was 17 years ago. It was actually a mind training class. And I said, technically he was a priest, and he said to me, I said, Father Justin, I keep having thoughts. I don't know what to do. I need to get rid of these thoughts. And he laughed and said, Amy, it's not about controlling your thoughts. It's about, it's about you not allowing your thoughts to control you. So when someone tells me I have thoughts, well, mindfulness and meditation are based, like mindfulness is attention training. Like when you have a thought, you redirect your mind, and eventually it's like riding a bicycle. So you're riding a bicycle and you would fall to the left and you would fall to the right, perhaps sometimes, and you push yourself back. Mindfulness is the same thing. It's attention training. You decide to focus on something, and when your mind wanders, you bring it back to whatever it is. And eventually there's just kind of this open space. You don't have all those thoughts, at least sometimes. If you try to have that as the end goal, you're going to feel like you failed all the time. I've been meditating for 17 years. Oh, granted, there were some I wasn't very mindful of, but I still have thoughts sometimes. Sometimes I have a very easy time not having thoughts. Sometimes I have a bunch of thoughts. Sometimes it is what it is. You always are breathing and you always have a body. So that's where I say you can start. Pay attention to your breath, pay attention to your body. It's that simple. Choose one. Do it for, I usually start with people like sense the airflow through your nostrils and notice the temperature, notice the rise and fall of your chest. And is it, is it with ease or is it, resistance there? Notice your abdomen. Most women will judge their bellies. So notice the expansion, contraction of your abdomen. You're just noticing. These are just ways to become aware. And then you can always, I sense my hands and feet. I've been sitting here doing it this whole time so that I stay grounded and focused and present. So you can always,
great
do
example.
these things. These are not like people say, I don't have time. I don't know how. You have a body and you're breathing. There's never a time that you don't, you could sense your feet as you walk to the bathroom, there's not, there's not a time in which you can't stop to just notice your breath.
So it doesn't have to be perfect, and
it's a
not that
practice, and that's what we
difficult.
call it, right?
Yeah.
Meditation practice. Nobody says meditation perfection. It's not going to be. All these years, and I've studied all kinds of different types of meditation. This is kind of why I like mindfulness. I do all types of various types myself, but I like mindfulness because it is this cultivating of compassion and curiosity for yourself and for the experience. That's why I like it. So because we're not judging it. And someone that teaches mindfulness would ideally be doing that, because that's what we're trying to do. Practice paying attention, cultivating compassion and curiosity about what we're paying attention to. That's it.
Yeah. That's awesome. So keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Anybody can do it. Don't get hung up on the 1,000 apps in the app store.
Or the religious aspect either. I've had people say to me, I can't do this because of my religion, and I don't equate it to a religion at all. I don't teach it. There are mindfulness teachers that teach it. It did originate technically in Buddhism. Call it something else. Attention training, awareness. I don't care.
Right. Yeah. Maybe a lot of people get kind of hung up in the buzzwords.
Well, I'm kind of tired of the buzzword too, because I watch people. I have some colleagues that have zero training in mindfulness that say they teach mindfulness, and there's this part of me that goes, and then I'm like, practice cultivating compassion and curiosity before you judge that.
Absolutely. Good. Great, Amy. Good. Any parting words of wisdom for those watching us right now before we sign off? Hello, Amy. Can you hear me?
No, I thought you were talking to somebody else.
Oh, sorry. No,
I just want to say thank you.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you and everybody listening. And it's wonderful to get to connect and share what I love so much about. Thanks.
Fantastic. And thank you for taking an hour out of your busy day so early in the new year to share part of your life journey and that turning point. And because I think we all have an understanding of what fuels your passion to help other people. What is the best way for people to reach out to you to find out more detail about what we spoke about today?
Email me, Amy McCae at amymccay.com. And then LinkedIn is always a good place. I am consistently there. It has a lot more information about what I do, and reading those posts are always, I like to think they're insightful and helpful. So
yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah. And so please engage with Amy. Reach out to her. I'll post her website and the email when I repost a replay of this conversation over the weekend. But please do reach out and find out more Remember, investing, I was speaking with somebody earlier today, investing in yourself is probably the most important thing that you can do. And so the next time you're thinking about buying that new computer, that new smartphone, think about what is going to be a healthier option for you, that new computer or investing in yourself. And it really might cause you to pause and think about where your priorities should be in terms of your development. It's early in the year. You can make these decisions anytime, but hey, no time like the present. And that's why I wanted to have Amy on at the very first of the year. For those of you that are on New Year's resolution kick, maybe you should think about how can you invest in yourself in 2023 to develop stronger empathetic leadership skills, better cope with stress, to take advantage of the positive aspects of stress, to practice mindfulness, all of these things as well. I hope you've put some of these tools in your toolbox. You have them at your disposal, but as Amy mentioned about 5 minutes ago, practice. Practice is so important. So you don't just carry around the tools in the toolbox, but take them out and use them. And that'll be incredibly beneficial. Amy, thank you. Once again, I appreciate that. And thank you to the audience for engaging. Really appreciate this. Special thanks to Ferlin in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. It's the middle of the night there. And Ferlin, thank you so much as well. People need to follow you. And Ferlin, by the way, will be on a program, on this program later in the quarter. And she helps people live younger. So I'll save that for a future conversation, but it's an amazing mission that she's on. And for those of you that aren't following Ferlin Quang, please do so as well. You learn a lot. So you take what Amy's talking about, you take what Ferlin will talk about in the future, and it's just, you can really live a different life by picking up different disciplines and learning a lot of tips from the experts. And please accept my appreciation for tuning in to the Packard Network Live. My mission is to bring people to you like Amy that have figured out how to perform resiliently amidst adversity. And so you'll continue to hear from me and my own experiences over 30 years, 30 countries, and you'll continue to meet a lot of people like Amy. Next week, the cameras will move down to Australia, and I will say the details later, but I'm going to be speaking with a wonderful woman who is going to give you a very unique perspective on what sales truly is and how to do it. So we're going to have a fun conversation about sales next week from somebody that I'll bring to you live from Australia. So we'll talk about that next week. And until then, I wish everybody a great weekend, a happy new year. And thank you so much for taking the time